All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to support and inspire new trauma therapists just starting out on the trauma-informed journey. I do that with my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0, my online courses and workshops, and the Trauma Therapist newsletter. If you're a therapist of any kind and you work with individuals who've been impacted by trauma, I invite you to head on over to my website at thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. All right, let's get started. Okay, Licia, are you ready to do it?
I am ready.
All right, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. I am thrilled to have as my guest, Licia Sky. Licia, welcome.
Thanks so much.
All right.
I'm really excited to be here.
So Licia is a Boston-based embodied awareness facilitator, an artist, singer-songwriter, and bodyworker who works with traumatized individuals and trains mental health professionals to use mindful meditation and movement, theater exercises, writing, and voice as tools for attunement, healing, and connection. She's a regular instructor in trauma healing workshops at Kripalu and Esalen, and has been teaching workshops on these subjects around the world, quite frankly. Licia, welcome.
Thanks so much.
All right. So before we get going here, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay. Originally, I was born on an Air Force base in California that no longer exists in the form that it was when I was born. My dad was a Tuskegee Airman and my mother was a Japanese war bride. And I've lived in many, many places around the world. My parents' history gives me a very close connection to intergenerational transmission of trauma. From the African American side of my family, who was part of the Great Migration from Mississippi north to cities in the north, to Chicago and Detroit and Seattle. And my mom, who survived the firebombing of Tokyo in World War II. So I guess you could say my whole life, I've had this personal connection to historical trauma.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we will get into that. As I think that provides a good context as we move forward. So originally from all over, where are you now?
I'm in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And since the pandemic, we have been in the Berkshires.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dive into this. How the heck, I mean, you gave us kind of I think a foundation and a context, but how did you get into this field such that you're doing what you do?
You know, I've taken a very circuitous path to everything. I'd say it's been a spiral that's been moving forward for a long time. And things that on the surface might not have looked connected are very connected. So I started practicing yoga as a little girl, basically. I found in the used bin of the bookstore where the covers used to be torn off, I found a yoga book, and I recognized poses that I had been doing myself just spontaneously in the book. And so I started studying yoga, and then my mom took me to a yoga class in the basement of a church somewhere, and I had a yoga practice, and then I had a meditation practice. And
so at what age are we talking now?
Oh gosh, 10.
Okay.
It really started. I'd say that was the first inkling about body awareness as being an important part of my identity, that, oh, there's this thing that I've been doing that it seems other people have been doing for thousands of years. And it's important enough, this silly, goofy thing that I've been doing, that other people put it in a book and practice it. So it let me know that something that I was doing innately had a value. And then I had a near-death experience when I was 12, And that's sort of been a touchstone and a talisman that I sort of measure things that I do in my life, the things that I'm attracted to and follow. I sort of refer back to that experience, and because that's a holder of value that I have, of purpose in life, that has to do with connecting people in love. And
what was that experience, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's something that you could look up. Near-death experience is an experience that's out of the everyday realm, where for me, I didn't actually have a physical event that was connected to it. Like some people are in a car accident and they see their life flash before them, or they have a heart attack and they have a life review. I didn't have to have that kind of experience, but I do have a lot of trauma in my life. And I've, as an adult, been connected with organizations for people who have had near-death experiences, and it's been very helpful for me. But in my near-death experience, I had a life review. You don't get much of a life review when you're only 12 years old. You haven't done that much in your life. But it was such an incredible place that I wanted to stay. And I was told, oh no, you have a lot of work to do. And I was sent back with a vision of what my life was supposed to be like.
Wow.
And a big part of my vision was around connecting people to their own light, and connecting people who are connected with their own light to each other.
Wow.
So, and it took me a really long time to understand what that meant vocationally. And body work was one of the first ways that I thought, oh, I could go in and do it this way. I could help people to heal with body work. And I think that was a pretty good instinct to follow. So you have yoga, you have body work. I also was very much a social activist, a peace activist. And there's a way that social activists didn't have much connection to the self-healing world, the meditation world. And the meditation world had a big divide from the activist world. But I live my life as if both of those things matter. I think it's just important to throw that in there, because I think that there are a lot of divides in the healing world that really need to be connected. That what we do personally also has to be reflected in what we do socially, and vice versa.
Licia, let me just say this.
Yeah.
I mean, from the get-go, I mean, you sound like one intense young woman.
I'm not that young. I'm 61.
No, when you from the get-go, when you were younger, when you were 10, and you were like drawn to yoga and how these other things unfolded. And what's really, I think, impressive to me and also inspiring is how you were sensitive to your experiences and how you were moved by them and pulled by them.
But one thing I'm going to say is that children who have trauma have very different social experiences, and they can be very isolated. And you compound that with me being a child of a military household that moved every year or two, having the kind of what you think of as normal personal connections that children have. I could not have those. Because when you have kids who are in a neighborhood who've lived together and gone to school together for years, they have a very different way of relating. And so books were a very important part of my way of understanding the world and surviving in a way that most 10-year-olds probably wouldn't have that. Although I know there are a lot of kids who are living in military families, but that was my experience, was that books were a great comfort to me. And I was always looking for ways to understand the world that I was in, which I think all children do, but most children do it through play.
Right, right. Let's talk about how things unfolded for you. I assume you went to school. How did you get to the point where you said to yourself, or maybe you didn't even say to yourself, but you were pulled to begin working in this way, working with people who'd been impacted by trauma? How did that happen for you?
You know, when I went to massage school, we were admonished that we were body workers and that we were not supposed to talk to people. We're not supposed to process emotions. We were not therapists. And yet, a huge, huge part of experiencing any kind of body work is this emotional, psychological component that goes along with touch. Mm-hmm. People react, they have memories, they have flashbacks, they have inhibitions and fears and reactivity around certain things. And, you know, what's extraordinary about body work is how powerfully calming and connecting it can be. But I think that there's a way that the gap between what body workers do and what psychotherapists do, there needs to be this spectrum, this middle ground where those skills become integrated, because they're not really separate life skills.
Again, we're talking about the divide in the healing world that you mentioned before.
It's huge. It's huge.
Interesting.
And I would say that I learned from the people that were my bodywork clients over time a tremendous amount about how valuable my presence was, my ability to listen was. And I also learned something about what my scope was. And I'd be working on somebody's hip and suddenly, my question would be, well, how long has your hip been this way? How long have you been living with this? And I'd be holding one hand on a person's hip and maybe rocking their knee with the other hand to see, well, how much give is there? How much tension is there? Where's the ease? And where's the defensive holding, the protective holding? What's happening here? And how long has this been this way? And the person would say, oh, well, I guess, probably around the time my father died. And then suddenly there's this huge emotional release that's happening around their father dying that correlates to a release in their hip. And that's nothing that my training at that time prepared me for. I don't know what bodywork training is like now. Maybe somatic experiencing does that, but nobody talked about that in my bodywork training. But I had started co-counseling as a teenager. Probably I was about 19, and I was in and out of different co-counseling groups, and I learned a lot about processing my own identity as a multiracial person, and a lot about safe listening skills and what emotional discharge looks like. So I was very comfortable with people crying and laughing and shaking and having releases. And I just figured that was part of what I could safely integrate into my bodywork practice. And I did. So over and over and over again, listening with safety just became a big part of what I did. And then I noticed that, I would do breathing with people. If somebody was having tension in their shoulders, and I would say, okay, well, you can't force yourself into somebody's locked tissue when they're in a protective stance. That feels like a violation. But you can be attuned to what's happening. You can be present with it. You can help a person to notice what they're actually doing. And I would sometimes invite people to breathe with me as I put a little bit of pressure on their shoulders. And sometimes that could work, but sometimes it felt like there was still something holding deep inside. And what I figured out, because I'm also a singer-songwriter, this very
Of course
eclectic,
you are.
you see this circuitous path growing, right? That I realized that, oh, they're not making a sound. They're holding back the vocal expression of the feeling they have inside. And so while the nice new age music would be playing in the background, I would invite people to say, ah, and sometimes their bodies would release. And sometimes saying ah and their bodies releasing would actually result in them having a little bit of crying happen. Or if I could, so there are a number of different sounds that people need to make. It's not just ah. Sometimes it's there are all kinds of sounds that are associated with physical tension, and there are all kinds of sounds like a sneeze or a laugh or a cough or a yawn that are innate parts of what our body does to release tension, that we can develop habits of holding and patterns of tightness that make us not make those sounds. And there's so much shame around sound and voice. Sound draws attention to you. It makes you more visible, and it makes you vulnerable to whatever judgment people have associated with their perceptions of the sounds that you are making. And you might have even had a physical response inside your own body as you heard my voice making those sounds. They might have resonated in your nervous system. I suggest to people that whatever we hear in another person's voice gives us a reflection of what their nervous system is doing, because our nervous system registers their voice in our body. We understand innately what kind of tension you have to make in your own body to make that kind of sound. So I would have my hands on a person and have a sense of what sound I intuited they could make that would help them release their tension. And I would make the sound first and invite them to join me, because that takes the shame away of them doing it by themselves and lets them know that I would accept that sound. So I would make a sound that I felt that person needed to make, and we would make it together. They could join in my sound. They could almost be invisible inside my sound until they could feel comfortable making it themselves.
When you started working in this way, and everything seems, I mean, your whole journey, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, this seemed very organic to you and you were drawn to this. It just seems like you were born to do this, quite frankly. When you started noticing that trauma was in the room, let's say, what was that experience for you initially like, as someone who, as a young person, had experienced trauma, as you said?
You know, I wouldn't say that I knew it was trauma. I never recognized it as trauma per se. I didn't have that word as an active piece of my vocabulary until I met Vessel. And then he kind of recognized, oh.
Which was how long ago?
2012.
2012. Okay. So about 10 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Then, well, if it wasn't trauma, it was it, how would you describe what that was that you were experiencing or noticing, or did you even notice it?
I did notice it. I recognized it as pain.
Okay. And how, I guess what I'm interested here in Licia is your experience to that as someone who, as a young woman, did experience pain.
Right. And well, from my peer counseling experiences and from my experiences as a person who had 2 home births, I saw myself being kind of a midwife. You know, that that what a person is doing when they express or release their pain is they're emerging, that their authentic self, meaning the self that can be opportunistic and fluid and creative in how they relate with the world, was able to emerge more fully because they're releasing their pain. And I still see that as what I do, that I am being comfortably present with somebody while they are facing their discomfort. And I'm making it safe for them to be present with things that they might often be incredibly ashamed of, never have told anybody about. They might be feelings that emerge. I had one person on a table start to cry and turn to me and say, I haven't cried in 20 years. What have you done to me? and you know, all I could do was assure them that it was a natural thing and a part of what their body needed to release, and do as much as I could to help normalize it, even though, you know, if you're confronted with your shame about crying, that can feel like a huge violation, that, oh, you did something to me and now I'm crying. But everything that I was doing was incredibly gentle, but happened to be making a person more aware of what they were carrying inside themselves.
Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Licia Sky. Let's talk a little bit about how you work with therapists or mental health, people in the mental health field. You offer trainings, workshops, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, I have a background in training as an actor through the Shakespeare and Company Actors Training Program. And it happens to be a very good way to learn embodied awareness exercises. What I do in the workshops that I teach by myself and the ones that I teach with Bessel, I'm bringing people into awareness of their interoceptive experience, the experience of sensation inside their body, and their proprioceptive awareness, their peripersonal space awareness, their awareness of what's around them in the room that they are subconsciously reacting to, as well as what they consciously notice. So we're a symphony of attention inside and outside, and we focus our attention in narrow ways sometimes and in broader ways other times. And people who have trauma habitually have a map of that prioritizes understanding where the danger is. And there are certain dangers that are more important than others to look out for. And that takes up so much attentional space that what's left over to optimally know how to relate to the world around you and how to socially connect with other people becomes extremely impaired. So the exercises that I guide start in stillness, start with noticing sensations inside your body, and eventually scaffold out to more and more awareness of your immediate body, externally as well as internally, having a sense of connection with your own body internally and externally. And then noticing, if you orient in space, if you look at what's around you, what are you attracted to? What do you see? What do you not see? What do you avoid? How big or small do you feel in the space? And then I do it in slow motion. So I'm explaining something to you pretty quickly that might be the opening 2 hours of a workshop.
Wow.
And the thing about doing it in slow motion is that it almost becomes a trance-like state, almost like a dream-like state. There's so much happening that we're sort of expanding and taking notice of, that we always take for granted of, that we can begin to pay attention to our habits, what's comfortable, what's uncomfortable, what do I normally do, what do I feel attracted to, what do I hear that I block out, what are the things that I'm looking for. And what happens is, when you do that in slow motion as a practice, the world becomes much more vivid. And when you practice your choices of attention in slow motion, what you practice in slow motion with, you have more skill with in speed. And we take the same level of observation of ourselves in stillness and we put it into movement, into how am I reacting as I move around a space? What happens to my breathing? What happens to my tension in my body? Can I still feel the floor under my feet when I'm walking around? And then if we're doing a live in-person workshop, it might be, what's it like to walk past a person? What happens to my breath? What happens if I see a person's face? What do I feel in my shoulders as I walk past a person? And then it might be, what's it like to walk side by side through the space? How do we wordlessly negotiate things that we wordlessly negotiate without thinking about? Can I watch what my choices are in each moment as I accommodate or am accommodated by the person who's walking with me?
Now, how do you articulate the benefit for therapists and those especially working with people who've been impacted by trauma? I mean, I can imagine, but I would like to hear you articulate that.
Okay, well, with trauma, there are different levels of self-awareness and body awareness and habits of cutting yourself off, living from the neck up, not knowing what your body feels. Like that person who started to cry and said, I haven't cried in 30 years. They're feeling something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Bessel says you have to befriend your body. You have to understand what your body is feeling and telling you, and what your senses are telling you about what's going on inside. That's part of owning yourself. That's part of beginning to find words for your experience. If you don't know what you're experiencing, you cannot find words for it. And so there are many therapists who want to talk, but they don't know how to be attuned and present with a person's body. And, I've had people look at their watches and say, do I have to do this exercise part? I just want to hear Dr. van der Kolk's lecture. Mm-hmm. Or other people who say, oh, that was a great meditation. Can I have the script for it? As if you could just read a script and guide somebody through paying attention to their body. But therapists need to be able to read their own bodies in order to help guide somebody else's body and body awareness. You have to have a practice of knowing how you feel while you are present with someone else. Mm. Otherwise, you're going to have these little triggers that cut you off. When I was going through my labor pains in a home birth, I had a midwife who was not triggered by my pain. She was able to stay present with me, assure me that what I was going through was normal, be confident that we were going to have a good outcome on the other side, that she was with me as my companion and guide. And I don't see very much difference between what we do emotionally helping people with the trauma from what I went through in my birth. Mm-hmm. The only difference is that instead of a baby being born, it's you emerging. Mm. So, yeah.
I'm just realizing that there's so much more to talk about. Yeah. You've got me going in so many different ways. We're gonna have to have you back here, Licia. What's going on for you now? I mean, obviously we're living in this pandemic. A lot of things are that once were in person or virtual. Is that the case with what you're offering, your trainings and so forth?
It's been interesting. We're very, very slowly coming back to a few select live in-person events, but throughout the pandemic, I've been working online with people. So I have patients that get referred to me that I work with one-on-one virtually. And I've also been doing workshops. I can't do the pairing parts of exercises and workshops. But I do a lot that has to do with connecting with yourself, being aware of your own body, being aware of your own environment, self-contact. I do a lot with self-holding and what those experiences mean. What's it like to feel the surface of your hand make contact with your body? What do you feel? Do you feel your clothing? Do you feel the texture of your skin and your flesh and bone underneath your clothing? What does your body feel of the contact of your hand? Those are the kinds of things that translate virtually in a pretty safe way most of the time. I mean, there's still people who hate self-contact, hate knowing what it feels like to breathe, you know, but less is more virtually. Slow is always the best way to go. I've been teaching some of this for psychedelic guide workshops. And one of our first in-person workshops that we're teaching will be at the end of October. We'll be teaching a ketamine-assisted psychotherapy workshop. And I'll be guiding expanded awareness exercises as a pre-journey for people to be more aware of their bodies and their personal experience, so they can know what the effects of the medicine are without needing a super high dose. They can be more present with what's happening and expand before they're ready to really expand in a bigger way.
What is, Licia, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they want to learn more about what your offerings are?
I have a website and I just updated it before the podcast, so my calendar is current.
Okay.
It's liciasky.com.
Okay. And that's LICIASKY.com.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I have a contact form there that if you fill out, I do my best to answer everybody who writes me.
Okay.
And I ask that if people write me, they say where they heard me. And if they have a headshot, that's also helpful, especially if they've taken a workshop with me before.
Okay. And how about a go-to book recommendation before we close out? Anything that's been inspiring to you, whether topically related or not? What would you say?
I'd say The Body Keeps the Score is the foundation of how I teach now. Really understanding how trauma affects how we respond to the world and different avenues for how we can open up how we respond to the world and be more effective and happy in our lives.
Okay.
It's a great book.
I'll have that linked up. The Body Keeps the Score, of course, by Bessel van der Kolk. I'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Licia, you are, I mean, come on, you're so friggin' inspiring. And I mean, it's I'm serious. I mean, this is why I do this podcast, because I mean, come on, this is great. I know people are going to be listening to this and there are going to be that woman is amazing. I mean, you are, there's no denying it. Come on. I mean, thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Seriously. I mean, this is seriously, it's so inspiring to me to be able to talk to someone like you and to hear, not just to hear you, but to feel you. You were obviously born to do this work. You feel it.
Yeah. And all those little weird bits fit together for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, look, I'd love to have you back again. I mean, there's so many things I would love to have you talk about.
Sure.
Awesome. It was awesome meeting you, and thank you so much for being here.
It was a pleasure. Really, really loved it. Thank you so much, Guy.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. And if you'd like to join the hundreds of other therapists who are each month keeping up to date and informed and inspired about what's going on in the world of trauma, I'd love to invite you to head on over to the Trauma Therapist newsletter. That's the traumatherapistnewsletter.com.